this second adaptation of Stieg Larsson's 2005 novel, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, also released in Sweden under the title Men Who Hate Women. Was initially designed to form the first of the Millennium trilogy, a trilogy which had introduced the rather enigmatic hacker lead in the form of Lisbeth Salander, a heavily tattooed punk chick who not only is one of the world's greatest hacker, but also is involved with disgraced journalist Mikael Blomkvist, here played by Daniel Craig. Well, Lisbeth Salander was now played by Rooney Mara. Already there had been a Swedish adaptation, and many were questioning whether an American adaptation would be able to live up to that standard, especially for a book so popular and these characters so iconic. I'm Owen.
I'm Kim.
And you're listening to Movies and Tea. Well, let's take it to the booth. Well, welcome everyone again to another exciting edition of Movies and Tea. Tonight we're obviously talking about The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, as we mentioned already, based on the 2005 novel by Stieg Larsson, a Swedish writer. And this is one of a host of adaptations of Swedish crime novels that we've seen over the years, both in forms of television and film. And I don't know what it is about the Swedes, but they're certainly do love a good adult dark drama, that's for sure, as we will certainly get into as we go here. And I think that probably makes their writing really the sort of perfect fit for someone with the mindset of Fincher has. So, but this is interesting in the fact that this was actually a remake. This was an original project for Fincher, and certainly a film that many were sort of questioning whether it was required or not. Many of those people were sort of very sort of set on the fact that they'd already seen the definitive version of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo with the Swedish version. Much more, as it had starred a very iconic performance by Noomi Rapace, who unfortunately was not brought back to reprise her role here, instead going off to make the rather underrated Prometheus instead. But we will certainly get into the casting choices as we go a bit further into this episode. So, I mean, Kim, I believe, much like myself, you'd read the book prior to watching the film, is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I had read the book, and I think I did watch the Swedish version before I even watched this one.
Yeah.
So, I think I did all of those things in around the same time, so I don't really remember a lot of it. And it was, the movie's been out for almost a decade now, which is hard to say because I still remember it really well, so. I mean, the story of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is pretty memorable as a thriller itself, and kind of darker fiction. It has some pretty intense scenes, which I think was replicated pretty well in this one. And definitely, after we've been through the last two films of Fincher, which is not exactly his usual style, it definitely feels like he's back to form when we're working with something a little bit darker in terms of thriller fiction. So, I mean, I guess it's meant to be, like, in the sense that he's kind of perfect for the project.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is very much a Fincher-esque world that we see here, while there's so many elements that we've seen in his previous film. Obviously the power of money being one. We see dark sort of cityscapes. We also see the much use of the colour yellow. And the face of evil is also very prominent here. But at the same time, this is a world which is very sort of bound to a very sort of popular source novel. Certainly when the book The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo came out, it was sort of one of those book series that everyone wanted to talk about, and certainly did extremely well. And it's kind of interesting the fact that when the original trilogy of books was released, which comprised The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Girl Played with Fire, and The Girl Kicks Hornet's Nest, Stieg Larsson basically died shortly after submitting it to his publisher. So it was a very unique situation, the fact that here you were given this character that everybody was really sort of into and vibing with, and then suddenly it's sort of like, oh, there's potentially no more that we're going to see of this character. So it sort of made it put everything sort of up in the air as what would happen, and we've obviously seen the series continue with the books, and we kind of expected that this was going to be the first film of a trilogy. It was really going to take off. Certainly when it was coming up to the release of the film, there was certainly a lot of hype, a lot of, especially in the casting of who was going to play Lisbeth Salander, which I don't know if you remember it, Kim, but there was so many names being bounced around, many of them way sort of off the mark.
I don't remember. I mean, back when this was going on, I hadn't even gotten to blogging yet. So film and like how deep I went into it and looked into the information was not really as detailed, I guess. So I don't know, but who was rumored at that time?
Yeah, I mean, most memorably, there was, this is my personal favorite, Emma Watson decided that she was suitable for the character, going so far as to get that horrible pixie carton to pierce her own nipples, which ultimately came to naught, even though she talked a very good game. The character was offered, however, to Natalie Portman, who declined due to exhaustion. Scarlett Johansson was considered, but Fincher considered too sexy. Jennifer Lawrence was also rejected because she was considered too tall. And finally, Rooney Mara is the one who was cast, which is certainly a very unique choice. And I think the one, if we were to like line up, all the potential actresses, I think she would be very much the outside choice here. I mean, this is an actress who made her debut in the urban slasher Urban Legends Bloody Mary, which is awful. She's in the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, which is also awful. And she was in Social Network, where she played Erica Albright. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, obviously, having seen the Social Network prior to watching this one, would you have ever sort of connected the character of Erica with going on to play this real sort of badass hacker chick?
Well, I mean, of course, if you base it on that Erica character, I actually, when I watch, because I've remembered seeing Rooney Mara in so many different from what she is in this one, that I sometimes forget about. Like, when I saw her in Social Network, I actually didn't recognize her at first, and I actually had to search it up and be like, oh, wait, that's her, sort of thing.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah, because she's in some interesting projects, and she's in some very daring ones. And I think that sometimes I forget that she's played Lisbeth Salander, but then she really fits the role. Because, she's not supposed to be like all those people that Fincher didn't want was, too sexy, too tall, whatever. It's because they're perfect. And Rooney Mara is... I'm not saying she's not pretty, but I'm just saying that she's able to play this kind of role really well. That she's not extremely sexy. She's like very skinny. She's very like, she has this attitude to her and this style that she can get into that really reflects this character really well. A bit like, and I think that part of me sometimes feels like she looks a bit like the Swedish the Naomi what's her name? What's her last name? Rapace?
Rapace? Yeah.
Yeah. That did the Swedish version. And sometimes, because I guess I connect them to this role, and sometimes I confuse the both of them when I see them in other movies or listed, and then I remember they're in these movies, but then I mix up the version that they're in.
Yeah, I mean, there's another couple of names to that list. You had Emma Stone was also considered at one point for the role, where I think would have been really interesting. And Ellen Page was another one that was considered, who, again, I would think would have been an interesting choice.
Ellen Page would have been fine. She's done roles like this where she's a little bit more like, I guess, quiet and sinister. In that sense, like she has a bit of a darker edge to her. Especially now that we've seen her in Umbrella Academy, where she has this kind of darker character as well. I definitely see that happening, but like Emma Stone, I think wouldn't really have brought it. Emma Watson, definitely not. And there's a lot of characters that, if they were able to pull it off, it would have been a really big surprise. But yet, because they haven't done and they weren't hired for the role, we'll never know whether they would have been able to pull it off, right?
Yep. I mean, to Mara's credit, she did actually undergo a number of real piercings for the film, which included multiple ear, eyebrow, and nipple piercings, most of which she removed after filming, apart from the nipple piercing for the possible sequel, which never happened, citing it's not something I ever want to get re-pierced, so I'm going to keep it in. It's a real sort of method acting, but as she said, it would always feel like a sort of costume, even when you're doing scenes where you're absolutely completely naked. It's all about getting into that character, because here we do have a character who, she's got multiple piercings, she's got tattoos, she's got a real sort of punk rock aesthetic to her, and yet at the same time she's able to move in a very sort of corporate and high what's the word, it's a word sort of like high business, so she would move, it's not uncommon for her to move in the same sort of circles that we saw Michael Douglas's character move in the game. And it's the fact that she's earned this reputation for being the best in her field of surveillance, and at the same time she's got this mystique that even her bosses are not even sort of like sure of her past. I mean, we see her boss, who basically says that, in many ways he's very sort of protective of her, and says that, she's sort of protected by the state, all her records are sealed, and it's sort of all these different elements to her. You think you know something about her, and then you find out there's about 5 or 6 other mysteries behind that one. So,
but yeah, I mean, it's one of the, I guess it's one of the reasons why the movie needs to be, I keep commenting about Fincher's movies being really long, and in this one it makes sense that it needs to be long, because we're having 2 parallel storylines. We're kind of learning about the case itself through the Blomkvist character, and then you have Lisbeth Salander's character on the other side. But her character is very quiet. What we learn is through other people's conversations, the things she goes through, and what she's doing, and all those different things in her life that she observes, and her surveillances and her abilities, and through the words of other people and her actions. But it's never through a lot of but it's just like her character has so much stuff to discover. Like, she has photographic memory, and all these things eventually come up that become really useful. She's actually kind of, it feels a lot like she's really smart, and it's kind of the awkwardness that a lot of like extremely smart people have, I guess, like very like geniuses will have that kind of awkward feeling towards other people, where she just kind of lives in her own little world a little, I guess.
Definitely so. I mean, she keeps her own circle, as we see throughout the film. I mean, the only sort of person that she interacts with really outside of Mikael is her sort of hacker buddy Flood, who's shown but never mentioned by name, and he's the guy wearing the Nine Inch Nails t-shirt, and a fun little nod to Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who are once again back to provide the soundtrack in their second collaboration with Fincher after joining him for The Social Network. And I had to wonder, really, because obviously if they're doing the soundtrack, they would be getting the footage after it's been filmed to sort of soundtrack, so whether this was like a fun nod to Fincher, just throw in there just to see if they sort of picked it up. Just seeing having this character with a Nine Inch Nails shirt on, and seeing what Trent Reznor can make of it. So, but because the studio was a little unconvinced that Rooney Mara had the right look to pay Salander, Fincher actually asked her to go out to get really drunk and then come in the next morning after a night of feeling rather unwell, and then he took pictures of her in this hungover state and sent it to the studio to convince them to cast her. I have to say, it works. Everything about her performance, I mean, obviously you have this sort of idea of what the character looks like, and I think while obviously the Swedish version certainly nailed their casting choice, and it perhaps would have been nice to see her come back to sort of reprise the role. The Fincher sort of takes it in his own way as well, and I think this is a very different film to the Swedish version. The Swedish version sort of is what it is. I think it's sort of a more straightforward adaptation, and when Fincher has it, he sort of adds that sort of Fincher flair to the proceedings, which sort of turn it into a much sort of darker adult drama.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in reality, it's like Fincher is able to bring these different elements, and it takes a different angle. I guess in one way, while it's long, it doesn't have as much of the details, if I remember the source material properly, but I might have mixed it up with the other books. I don't know right now.
Okay.
But at the same time, like, I feel like the adaptation has its own little flair. Some things are cut out, and the focus is more on specific few people. It limits its characters so that you're in this world and it's easier to understand these characters, give them a lot more depth, and then your focus is much more on just solving this case. And that's the main focus of it, that keeps it very just on track to just discovering where things are going and the little twists and what happens, and because there's already a lot to go off from that point. Obviously, you know, we have little things like Lisbeth Salander is the one character where we learn a lot through her, and there's some of those really extreme scenes with her new guardian, forgot his name, that was very shocking. And I think probably one of the things we do need to discuss is the, how do you call those scenes, I guess, very extreme moments. I don't know how you call it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the scenes of graphic rape and sexual abuse that are shown here, and those are in the Swedish version. I mean, the Swedes being, you know, European, they don't handle sex with the same sort of embarrassment as, you know, as Brits and Americans do. They've got a very sort of open attitude to sex and nudity, as we see, and you see it with film, you know, the directors like Tin Top Brass and I'm trying to remember another foreign director from Europe now, but yeah, you see it in a lot of European cinema. It's a very sort of free sort of experience. So I think even by that sort of standard, it is kind of shocking, but it's certainly an eye-opening sequence, and it's the one I was most surprised actually made it across the American version. I thought they would have really sort of watered down the sequence, but no, Fincher really goes full tilt for it. And it's not just that initial sort of forced blowjob sequence in her handler's sort of office, but also when she's in his apartment, and we have the shot of the outside the door, and it's the camera's slowly moving back down the hallway, and I thought, oh, that's how Fincher's going to approach it. He's going to be like, you know, you get this taste of this horrific sequence, and we're hearing it through the door, and that's going to be how he says it. But no, we sort of then go, we take a little jump forward, and then we see exactly what true horrors are going to lie ahead. And I think it's important in terms of the plot that you see this very sort of graphic and grotesque sort of sequence, as it makes her eventual revenge only the sort of more poignant, because it's sort of like you have to see her be subjected to this one act for her to subject him to her act. It's sort of like you have to have one, you can't sort of have one without the other.
But it's also it also goes in hand with what they're trying to talk about, right? The whole point of this story was to talk about men who hate women, or at least men who take advantage of women. And in this case, while obviously in comparison to who is behind all of these, the disappearance of in the search of Harriet, and the deeper plot that goes in that case, and the person responsible for that one, this is kind of like a lighter version. This guardian, he's just taking advantage of her, the fact that she needs his help to kind of satisfy his own, I guess, desires, I guess. I mean, obviously he has some pretty extreme fantasies going on, and extreme sexual preferences. So I'm trying to be delicate with what I'm saying. So, but it's the, I remember when I read the book, this was one of those really, really shocking scenes. And sometimes you can discuss about whether this scene is necessary in the movie and whether it needed to be there. And in my mind, I think that it has such a strong presence in the story itself and the source material that even if the audience in the Americas are much less accepting of things like this and get shocked easier by it, I feel like it needed to be there to really bring through the point. And it really shows Lisbeth's character, because it's yes, she might have been taken advantage of because she was surprised, but when you give her enough time, the revenge is there. She's not some weakling. She doesn't go home and cry about it. She goes home and tries to figure out how to fight back and win back her freedom so that this will never happen again.
Exactly, and we see her as this fighter. I mean, she has the attempted mugging on the subway before this, which is also set up, and I think this whole sort of sequence is important because it's sort of filling in the mystique of her character, because there's so many things that are sort of hinted of. It's like, why does she have a state-appointed guardian? Because obviously before this, her former guardian, Holger, who's we see has suffered a stroke, and we are led to believe he had a much more lighter relationship with her. He basically, was just there to fill in the boxes and sign the paperwork and basically let her get on with the thing, where in comparison to his replacement, Nils, who's this absolute sadist and uses his power to extort things that he wants. And I would assume it's not just from Lisbeth, but also basically many of these girls under his ward who if they're like her, I would consider them to be seen as being sort of like damaged. I mean, he lists off these whole list of things. The fact she's been arrested multiple times, she's got assault charges, she's got stays in mental institutions, and there's also other colourful details. The fact that she is highlighted, the fact that she's bisexual and she's very very sexually sort of active, so she does what she wants to do, and it sort of by him having this sort of power over it, it's sort of another challenge for her to overcome. It's sort of like he's withholding her money, and by her getting her revenge, she also secures her independence as well, and essentially being able to live this sort of lifestyle that she wants, where she's not constantly on surveillance, where she's not having to constantly answer to people to ensure their funds are being maintained. So we talk a bit about Blomkvist, because we've obviously got distracted by Lisbeth, who is obviously the more interesting character here. But obviously Mikael Blomkvist, he's, as we said already, he's a disgraced journalist who's hired by Henrik, whose grandniece, she had disappeared a number of years ago, and since every year he receives a different dried flower painting, and he is hoping that Mikael can obviously find out what happened to her and offers at the same time to help him get back at the businessman who basically has ruined his career. Now, in comparison to Lisbeth, I mean, Mikael's kind of more sort of straight-laced, he's more sort of like traditional, but at the same time he's got those sort of less traditional elements to him. I mean, the fact is that he's involved with his editor at the Millenium magazine, who herself, we find out, has got an open marriage. So while his marriage might have been destroyed by this relationship, her marriage maintained, and her husband's well aware that she's carrying on with Blomkvist. It's kind of funny in the opening sequence as well, when Elizabeth is giving her report, she's also commenting on his sexual prowess, which is a real sort of in-depth surveillance job, I have to say.
Well, I mean, it's not really that hard when she's like hacked into his computer and she's tracing the guy down, like everyone pretty much is kind of like, nothing is really a secret to her. She can break through anything, and I'm sure there's like other communication and things that they've had to secure these rendezvous with the editor, right? So it's not. I don't think you can see that Lisbeth is very detailed in what she does and very efficient, and that's why she's the best. She finds the things more than they actually need, but she only reports on what they need.
Definitely so. It kind of made me wish that I'd seen this in the cinema when it had come out, just to only see the audience's reaction to the word cunnilingus. So, because that's a word you don't have in Hollywood cinema. You don't have many things in this film that you have in Hollywood cinema, and the role is obviously here played by Daniel Craig. When they were talking about casting, there were other names bounced around, including George Clooney, Johnny Depp, who I think would have been pretty good, Viggo Mortensen, who again would have been pretty good, and Brad Pitt, which I don't know. I don't know if Brad Pitt is too pretty for this role or not.
I think he's. I don't know. I feel like at this point, Brad Pitt's done too much Fincher projects, and we're starting to really mix up his characters. That he doesn't need this project anymore. Not that Daniel Craig needed it, because I don't know if this was right before. Was it after? This was after James Bond, right? Like the Casino Royale.
It was, yeah. I mean, he had done Casino Royale. They were in production for Skyfall, which initially meant that he wouldn't have been able to do the film, but Skyfall got put back, so he was able to do this film. Yeah. In the meantime.
Yeah. So pretty much that comes to the point that Daniel Craig didn't need this project, but it was definitely something that I guess maybe it was an interesting project to him. So yeah. I
think so.
Yeah, because it's a decent project to be in. I mean, between Casino Royale and all those, and even like between Quantum of Solace to Skyfall, there was quite a few movies that he was a part of. So it's definitely one of the better ones during that time. As I look at the IMDb listing.
It's kind of funny as well because Fincher came to the set of basically he was filming the Adventures of Tintin, so he comes to where Spielberg's filming that, and he's of course in a full body motion capture suit, and he takes his meeting with Fincher, and Fincher goes away. He's happy with what he finds, and apparently one of the other crew members that turned to Daniel Craig and was like, "Yeah, you haven't got that role at all." Apparently they were wrong because Craig was obviously cast in the role, and I think he does well for the role of Mikael Blomkvist. It's also interesting the fact he has a Swedish accent for all of 5 minutes.
I don't know. I mean, I don't really. Sometimes because I'm Canadian, I can probably pick out a Southern accent the most, and then all these other accents kind of get a little bit mixed up in the process of things. So it doesn't bother me as much. But, I mean, if we talk about Daniel Craig, I think he does okay. But Daniel Craig has something where he's very, like, I feel like his role is always this, he always acts the same way. His reaction is always the same. Like, when you're putting him in James Bond, or he's just not in a fancy suit, he's freezing in some Swedish northern area kind of thing, right? It's only his outfit is different, but his facial expressions are very much the same. So to me, it's not really like his acting needed to be really good. It just needed to be sufficient for the role to portray the character. And I mean, in that sense, he is really fitting because, I mean, this is also kind of a mystery. It's something very similar to, he actually needs less action here, and he just needs to get beat up. So it wasn't exactly like, I don't know. I mean,
he just needed a willingness to be hung in someone's basement.
Exactly.
That was basically
exactly. And then the willingness to have these sexy moments with ladies,
which I'm sure was just
which isn't
so
a problem
hard.
because he's James Bond, so he's used to it.
It's kind of like if the cameras didn't cut away, that's what we would have seen. Good on you. I mean, the whole like romantic angle between Blomkvist and Salander, it's just a middle-aged fantasy that is of the writer. It's so stupid. It made no sense in the book. I mean, it makes sense obviously from.
I don't think
Salander's point.
I don't think it was supposed to make sense because in the end, I feel like a lot of the whole thing was, yeah. So the deal with Blomkvist is that he has this thing where I always feel like he's never in control of the situation. He's just really good at investigating. But everything that, like, it's all initiated by Lisbeth. From that point to how it ends, where she sets up the situation so that the Wennerstrom or whatever has his own issues, like gets caught up in all the bad that he's done with the information that they have, and all of this is propelled by Lisbeth. You never feel like there's like this real chemistry or this real like connection between them. They're together because they're together right now and they both need company. And that's what their relationship essentially feels like.
Yeah, I think their initial meeting in her apartment, though, is probably one of my favorite scenes of the film.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting because she's sort of like, she's already done the full surveillance on him already, and that's basically how he's introduced to her, in the fact that he finds out that prior to being given this assignment, the Vangers carried out their surveillance on him, and he was completely unaware of, and the fact that he knows there's certain things in that file that it would have been impossible for anyone to get, and this sort of makes him realize that, you know, this is the girl that he's going to want to help him with his research. And by him, he just randomly turns up at her apartment, and it's such a shift in power, because up until this point she's the one who's held all the power, and she's very used to being the one in control, and here she's presented with someone who's basically challenging her power, her control, her constant control over the situation, by just randomly turning up at her apartment unannounced. Even though he does bring breakfast, which I think if you're going to turn up at anyone's place unannounced, if you bring them coffee and breakfast, I think that sort of helps smooth things over a way.
Yeah, I think in some ways that really sets up a dynamic of how she becomes really interested in Blomkvist. Not obviously, I feel like she was interested in him in the beginning because of the surveillance that she did on him. But at the same time, I feel like in some ways she finds him a little different from the people that she's met, especially with, you know, dealing with the crappy guardian, the sadistic guardian, and just, I guess, the people that she bonds with is very different. And with Blomkvist, it's not the same. The meeting kind of, I think in some ways, when people are very, like, when women are very, like, strong characters, it kind of surprises her, and you see that surprise in her face as he goes in and he's kind of like commanding the situation, just walking around, setting himself up, putting down the breakfast and putting everything down, waiting for her to come out, and just telling her, you go put on some clothes and whatever, and then I'll wait here with breakfast, you know, whatever sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think I mean, even the sequence before that where you've got Salander at the nightclub and she's picking up the chick, and the whole scene is sort of shot in these sort of flashes, almost like a disco strobe light sort of effect, where we see these flashes and it's just constantly taking these little jumps in time within the club. I think it's just another absolutely stunning sequence. I mean, the whole film itself is absolutely stunning to look at, and it really sort of makes the most of Fincher's visual flair. I mean, obviously in his use of the yellow in particular is just looks really fantastic, because we get to see him have like a number of dinners with Martin Vanger, who's the sort of CEO of Vanger Industries, and again we also see like the sort of grandeur of Henrik Vanger, who's sort of like the head of the family. And I mean, this is a family who are old money. Yeah. And that they all basically live on this island, and they're a family who's, with the disappearance of Henrik's sort of grandniece, it sort of had this knock-on effect of the whole sort of family falling apart, because they didn't get along with each other the best to begin with, and this family business. I mean, it's also a family with numerous Nazi members, which adds some colour to it, certainly.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, I mean, here's a really good point to say that I always think that Stellan Skarsgard, who plays Martin Vanger, is so underrated as an actor. He's able to carry these roles so well. I mean, even when you go back to another very, I guess, very sexual movie like Nymphomaniac, his role is small, but there's still so much to his character there, and that's just the beginning of a list of tons of other movies that he's been in, obviously.
He's got great diversity. He's able to play charming and sinister in the same breath, and it's that transition from one to the other. And he's one of a number of Swedish actors who brought into the production, which I think was really good, really great to see. It's the fact that Fincher didn't just basically try and cast a bunch of American actors and have them do Swedish accents. He brings in a large Swedish cast as well, and by filming it in Sweden as well, it did actually take a lot longer because of them constantly having to do the lighting, so the sort of setups took a lot longer to adjust to compared to Fight Club, which is they absolutely just breeze through compared to this film. But yeah, certainly, I mean, Stellan Skarsgård was just really enjoyed the production, mainly because he got to sleep in his own bed for the first time in years, because normally he's having to film over in America, and here he was filming in his basically his hometown. So Christopher Plummer, I think, is also really good. I think that the version they play here removes a lot of irony of the Henrik we see in the book, but I think it works well for the role. And I think I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember they had another actor in mind for the role, but I've completely lost who it was now. But nope, it's gone. But no, Christopher Plummer, another actor I'm always happy to see turn up when he turns up.
For sure. I mean, I don't remember a lot of Christopher Plummer other than what was it, Sound of Music?
Okay.
So like very early young age him, and then I think the last time I saw him was in The Beginners or something. So I don't know. I always feel like he turns up and then I forget that he's been in that, and it just kind of happens that way. Let me take a look. What else have I seen? I feel like I've seen him in something else.
Well,
I always
he's
see him
another
in
Canadian actor
Hmm?
who you don't. He's another Canadian actor you don't realize is Canadian, kind of like Mike Myers.
Mike Myers, I know he's Canadian.
Yeah, no, but I never would assume Mike Myers is Canadian.
I kind of knew, but I mean, yeah.
He's in Dragnet. He's in 12 Monkeys, Syriana.
Yeah, National Treasure. I watched that.
The New World.
Yeah. So yeah, there's quite a few. I mean, I sometimes don't remember. Like I said, I don't remember what he's in sometimes. But I mean, he does a good job here. He's not exactly. I don't think the role is too huge, especially since once the investigation starts, his involvement really, it's more of like a smaller role that he's involved in, and he kind of just shows up at the end when everything's solved.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a shame that obviously the novel doesn't allow for him to be present all the way through. I mean, he obviously sort of sets up the mystery and then comes back for the end. Yeah,
but I think it's okay because I like the fact that they kept it pretty simple, because I remembered when we had the book, it sometimes got like, once you had to connect all these faces to everything, it gets really confusing because the Vanger family is huge and everybody has beef with each other, and there's this problem with this person is so complicated, and then that person is that way, and you have to remember all these names, and it gets really confusing. So the fact that they closed it in so that it was really focused on just those few characters, but the other members of the family kind of got mentioned, it really kept things on track. And you didn't really need the Henrik character to be there all the time. He was there when he needed to be, and he was kind of like the propelling force of moving this to really trying to make it happen. But like to solve this case and find Harriet or figure out what happened to Harriet. And it works for what it is. Obviously, I mean, Christopher Plummer is a great actor, and it would be great to see him in a bigger role, but I think with what he had, he carries it well.
For sure. And it's funny you mentioned, obviously, as well about the numerous Van Gogh sort of characters within the film and certainly within the book. And I love the fact that Blomkvist actually responds sort of like, it's getting rather confusing when he's sort of listing all the family members. And
where they're living, and which house, and what's happening to who hates who, and who gets along with who, and who he talks to. Yeah, that conversation was entertaining.
I liked his little cottage that he gets to stay in, though. I think that would be my sort of ideal hideaway. But yeah, I think the problem with the film is it suffers in the same issues as the book. With the book, it took forever to sort of get going, and I think with the film, it spends a lot. It's sort of tied into that same sort of framework, unfortunately, where it feels that it takes a while to get going initially, and then we get to the end, and it takes a bit too long to wrap up the actual mystery, because we have the sort of like what we assume to be the conclusion to the mystery, but it's actually not. It's just another mystery that we sort of stumbled across as a sort of accident, really.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel a little bit, this movie in general, other than the shocking scenes and those shocking moments, it's more a movie of moments. And then everything in between feels like it's just there.
Okay.
I mean, the movie doesn't move very fast. I didn't mind the book so much. I actually remembered I liked the book quite a bit, and I breezed through like all 3 books in like, I don't know, a month or something like that. It was pretty quick.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I remembered I did it fairly quickly because I bought all 3 books in one shot. I had it in a box set, and I had finished it really quickly. But I didn't have issues with the pacing in a book, but some things that got translated into a movie just felt like it took too long to set up. Like, they took a lot of time in the first half that I appreciated to really kind of build Daniel Craig, like the Blomkvist character, and then to build the Salander character, and to understand this whole case of how Harriet went missing and the whole situation. And it was done really well. I mean, in the sense that it was, beautiful to look at. Visually, it was really nice. They did it all where there was a lot of depth into it. But to get into the case, the second half was kind of like where all the action was in. And it was just constantly looking at more information and more information, and looking through more information, and some speed hacking on Salander's part, and then some exchanges, and then it just felt like the case was going, but I wasn't really involved in the case. Like, they didn't really give you a chance because everything had to be hidden in order to build the twist. To build to that point where you were like, oh my god, this person, he's involved in this. And the shocking moment of who it is, and what he's been doing, and how this happens, and what's wrong with this family, and that sort of thing. And it builds into this thing. And I think all of this, the setup, had no other choice because they needed to do this in order to create the mystery behind revealing that twist. I don't know. I'm kind of split in the sense that I feel like the movie was long, but at the same time there were moments that I didn't feel like it dragged as much. So I'm kind of on the fence as to why. I just don't know. I mean, it's a hard one to say. Like, I enjoy the movie when I watch it, but it's not a movie that I frequently want to go back to watch.
I know what you mean. I think I was just so enthralled by the fact it was finally like a genuinely adult thriller.
Yeah.
The fact that it's not afraid to go dark. It never dumbs or treats anything with sort of kids' gloves. And
yeah.
It's the fact there's so many, as you said, there's so many Fincher moments within the films. It's just like when Blomkvist is reading the case notes, and every time he underlines something, we see a flash in his mind's eye of what he's reading, and I thought those things were really sort of nice. So it's got a lot of sort of flair to it. The soundtrack's really interesting as well. I think
I never talk soundtrack about anything, but Girl with the Dragon Tattoo was one of the ones where I was watching this and I was like, man, this soundtrack is amazing. It just matches everything, really builds the atmosphere, really gives it a lot of, really matches the style of it. Yeah, so I absolutely loved it.
The soundtrack actually runs to 3 CDs of material. Most TV shows have, even for a whole season, just amassed to 1 CD. But they really went all out and created 3 CDs worth of material. Most of which is even included in the film, but they still released it anyway as part of the official soundtrack. And they went for this sort of extreme length when they did the soundtrack for the Watchmen TV series as well. There's about 3 or 4 volumes of that as well. And that's also really awesome as well. Just trying to see what else there is. The waitress that Blomkvist is seen having a discussion with at the start is actually the daughter of the original actor who played Blomkvist in the Swedish version. Fincher basically thought it'd be funny to have the sort of predecessor of the role having an interaction with the role her father had obviously played. I have to agree. At the same part, Rooney Mara, to give her sort of character more sort of skeleton and pose, started skipping meals and actually had to be forced by Fincher to eat meals because she was getting too skinny. But she does deserve some real credit for her dedication to this role.
Rooney Mara is also, she's in a lot of stuff, but if you look at her IMDb, she's in a lot of movies. But you never remember that she's in those movies. I remember her the most in A Ghost Story, and it was just because it was such a unique movie to be a part of. And even though her role wasn't particularly huge, she was one of the roles that was known pretty much. And stuck around that, obviously her one scene is very popular of just eating pie for like 10 minutes or something. So I personally think she's really great as an actress, and this definitely gives her, does her justice, and not just, watching her eat pie and emote while eating pie. So, which I have to say, if you can really get into that character, then you will never, I always say, if you can get through A Ghost Story, just as a side note, if you can get through A Ghost Story, you will never be scared of slow burn movies ever again.
Okay. There's something I want to also bring up here is we mentioned already we were talking about the soundtrack, which features the cover of Immigrant Song which is a Led Zeppelin song, and here it's covered by Trent Reznor and Karen O of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. And it's used to incredible effect here as we get Fincher giving his take on a James Bond opening title sequence, which really highlights many of the key sequences of the film, as well as the characters and personality within the film. And I have to say that this is a title sequence that Nick Rehak, who joined us for the Zodiac episode, I'm not sure if it's actually on the episode, but certainly one of the discussions we had when we were talking about Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is just that how amazing this opening title sequence is. And I have to say, it is absolutely probably one of my... If we were to do like top Fincher moments, I would say this would definitely be in there, because this sequence is incredible.
Yeah, I mean the opening sequence, right?
Yeah, the opening sequence where it's all like
sure.
black liquid and stuff.
I totally agree. I think it's one of the ones that I remember the most. Obviously, it brings in so many of the elements of what we're about to see, and it's so relevant to what you're doing, but it's so pretty to look at also. Like visually, it just kind of grabs your eyeballs, You really, really just focus in it, and I really like that.
Yeah, I mean, I just you can look at it and you can like pinpoint, oh, this is a representation of the hacker sort of character. This is the vigilante side. This is this is the all these different sort of bits and pieces. Like you see the elements of Salander's tattoos, such as the phoenix, the dragon tattoos.
Yeah.
You get the flowers elements, which is obviously a reference to Henrik and the pressed flowers he gets on his birthday every year. So it's just really fun to sort of go back. And I mean, there's even like sort of like the references to what I assume would be like the Lisbeth rape sequence in here, because we obviously get the female face that's sort of shattered. But again, is this to sort of tie into the general sort of domestic violence theme that runs throughout this film? Because I mean, it's obviously has that prominent scene with Lisbeth, we also get numerous other references to violence against women throughout the film, one of which is obviously a big sort of catalyst for one of our mysteries here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what else to say.
Yeah. But I love Immigrant Song, and I love this one because it's that one. This is something that I love. If you do a cover version well, it changes the meaning of a song entirely. Such as when we look at Johnny Cash's cover of Nine Inch Nails' "Hurt," the original version is about heroin addiction, but when Johnny Cash sings it, it's like an old man looking over his life. Whereas Immigrant Song is a song about Vikings. And when it's done by Led Zeppelin, and here it's just more about the rebellious spirit. It very much matches with the Salander sort of character and her sort of personality. Kind of makes you want to go off and just do rebellious shit whenever you hear it. So that's, I've sort of added it to my sort of my current amp up mix. It's got that in there. So fun little bits of background information now. The film opened at number 3 in the US box office, behind Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, which starred Mikael, who played Blomkvist in the original film, and also Sherlock Holmes Game of Shadows, which starred Naomi Rapace. So the two lead actors of the Swedish original managed to beat the American remake. The film actually did turn a profit. I always think this looks impressive in terms of profit, because I mean the budget was 90 million. It took in 232.6 million, which apparently is not what the studio wanted because they scrapped the 2 sequels. Would you have liked to see Fincher do the rest of the saga?
I mean, it would have been interesting to see where he could take it. It's definitely like you said, this is his cup of tea, right? This is really the type of thriller that he would get involved in, and it has the source material that's really worth for him to really look at. And I think, in my mind, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is not a bad movie. I wouldn't rank it as top Fincher quality, obviously, but
no,
it still has a lot of elements that work, and visually it's done so well. But it's always hard because, like, I would have liked to see this into a movie, but there are certain stories, and I think The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo has that kind of feeling to it, where once you know the twist, it's not shocking anymore. So when I watched it after I had read the book, and after I had watched the movie Millenium, I didn't really, I guess I don't feel the shock as much when we see the twist and the whole unveiling and revealing the whole big scheme behind the whole deal, and the domestic violence and all that sort of stuff. So these books are really hard, and I think that's one of the issues, is that I would have liked to see it just to see where it would have went, but I always feel a little skeptical when people do a lot of adaptations, because you really don't know. It's really a fine line between being good and being kind of disappointing. Maybe not bad, but disappointing.
The scene where of Salander's office belongs to DICE, the people behind the Battlefield series of games, mm-hmm. which, if you like video games, is important. There's also a real bunch of interesting sort of bits about the obviously the aforementioned rape sequence, which I think we've talked about a surprisingly large amount. I wasn't expecting us to really sort of dwell on it as much, but basically, Jorik van Weghen, who plays the rapist in this film, he basically, after he shot the sequence, spent the whole day locked in his hotel room crying. He also offered to shoot the scene where the tables were sort of turned on him. He offered to basically shoot it nude as a way to sort of like even up for the fact that when Rooney Mara did her sequence, she was stripped, and it was basically decided that that nobody wanted to see this abusive man naked, and instead he wore flesh-colored trunks, which are then digitally removed. But credit to him for wanting to do that. And I mean, when we see the shower sequence afterwards, most of that bruising is real that we see on Rooney Mara's body. So
yeah, no, that entire part was really shocking. Like because you see the pulling off the clothes and the general, like, it's not focused on the action itself, but the reaction and the sounds and it's very troubling to listen to. Very disturbing. But yeah, I mean, the guy who does this is very, very good, and he looks really familiar. Like, I've seen him in something else. He was the game master in Escape Room, the 2019 version,
was he?
not the shitty version.
Yeah, now I see it. That was great. He's also in 47 Ronin. He was in Black Hat, which was awful. A lot of Swedish productions, unsurprisingly, which of course I've not seen. He was obviously, as you said, he was in Escape Room in a very cool role, though. The use of Orinoco flow during the basement torture sequence was completely by accident. Basically, they were going through Stellan Skarsgard's iPod to try and find music to play, and Daniel Craig flicked onto that and basically said that was the song that they should use. So initially it was met with laughter, but it really sort of suits the scene rather bizarrely. At the same time, they were going to use saran wrap originally for the suffocation sequence, but it was just too clumsy to use, so Fincher sent the production crew out to the nearest supermarket just to buy plastic bags to use instead. So, and I just,
well, that would have been hard to find nowadays.
Yeah, wouldn't it? The most expensive bit of your production is buying plastic bags. But yeah, that's I mean, is there anything else you want to bring up on this one?
No, I think I'm good.
But yeah, I think with Dragon Tattoo, it's a surprising watch. I mean, it's not perfect by any means, but there's certainly enough interesting sort of sequences, and it's way and above The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. But I don't know if it's sort of one of the Fincher ones I would sort of return to. I maybe return to it every sort of couple of years and feel that it was like completely fresh again, but it's not one that was sort of like put into sort of the regular rotation. And at the same time, do I really sort of class this as like the hidden gem of the Fincher filmography?
Well, I mean, we will see.
Exactly.
We will see, won't we? Because we're coming up to the end of the season, so
let's get into some further viewing now. I mean, obviously, if you like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, where do you go from here?
Well, I mean, the obvious choice is obviously the Swedish original Millennium trilogy. Other than that, I mean, it would be, I think, a movie very similar to a lot of twists and strong kind of complex female lead would be the next movie we're going to be looking at, and that would be Gone Girl. And if you want something a little bit darker, I always refer to Gone Baby Gone, because that's a movie that really left a mark on me, apparently. So I always refer to it whenever there's something with a big twist, but very dark.
Yes, definitely all very good choices there. I mean, for myself, I'd throw into the mix 8mm. Again, both feature a investigator going in to being hired by a family of wealth to look for a missing girl. And I think 8mm is very underrated. I mean, the fact that it's a Nicolas Cage movie and Joel Schumacher movie as well, I think it means that a lot of snark casters tend to sort of really push it down and really sort of nitpick over the details, but I think it's still a really fantastic thriller and features some really fascinating performances and characters throughout. I think it's definitely one of those interesting deep dives into sort of the sleazy underbelly of society. So,
well, yeah, and plus, I mean, right now it comes at a time where we're recording this right after the pretty much Joel Schumacher has passed away.
has he?
Yesterday? Yes.
Oh, I know it.
So it would be kind of, pairing it, and it would be a good way to remember him. Watch some of his underrated films.
Okay. Another one I want to throw in there as well is Silence of the Lambs. And this is just the unique pairing of personalities to solve a case. Obviously, in the case of Silence of the Lambs, we've got the FBI trainee Clarice, who's teamed up with the master psychiatrist and cannibal, Hannibal Lecter. And here we have that unique pairing here where we've obviously got the investigative reporter Blomkvist teaming up with the eccentric master hacker and investigator in the form of Salander. It's like mismatched pairing of two personalities obviously coming together to solve a case, even though with this one no one has sort of like an underlying motive, which is obviously what makes Silence of the Lambs so interesting. But
just a little thought I had is that if you like this, I actually think if you're into gaming and you haven't played it yet, Life is Strange actually is a pretty good pairing. I don't know if you agree, but I actually see some similarities, especially when we have that final scene where he gets hooked, and that really kind of connects to how Life is Strange story kind of turns out at the end.
Oh, yeah. We were talking about killer motive. I think there's definitely connections that can be drawn between both of their basements for sure.
Yeah.
Very good. So obviously that was our fun review of Girl with a Dragon Tattoo. Thank you as always for listening. And Kim, where are we going to next?
Well, as I said before, we are heading to our last movie of the season, but we will be progressing to something else after. So the last movie of the season for David Fincher is 2014's Gone Girl. Also a adaptation of the Gillian Flynn movie, who also wrote the screenplay. So, and it stars Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike. Yeah,
definitely a film which I think surprised a lot of people with just how capable their cast was. Not in the case of both Ben Affleck as Rosamund Pike, but just overall, this was a thriller that everyone saw and something everybody wanted to talk about. And we're going to be getting into the deeper mystery when we look at that on our next episode. But thank you as always for listening, and if you've not done already, please do hit the like and subscribe button, and maybe leave us a review. It really helps raise the profile of the show. You can follow us both on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and you can also check out our blog, which is moviesandteapodcast.wordpress.com, which has got our complete archive of episodes for the previous 4 seasons, as well as interesting bits of writing, and our Friday Film Club, where every Friday myself and Kim pick a film and we put it together into a fun little double feature. Sometimes there's theme, sometimes there's not, but either way, it's a chance for us to dive into films that we really want to explore further. But until then, thank you as always for listening. Thank you to my co-host Kim, and we will be back next time to talk about Gone Girl. Good night.